Robin Vincent and welcome to Molten Modular. Now, if you're following this along in my series of exploring my journey into Eurorack, you've just jumped from episode 25 where I did my very first live performance on a little bitty bit of Modular. And now, in episode 26, you're looking at this going, what the heck happened? Well, it's a couple of years down the line, right? Because what happened was that I was doing this series on Eurorack and it was good. It was all about my journey and development and that kind of thing. And then at some point, I started doing more reviews of modules and other bits and pieces and associated stuff rather than concepts and discovery. So I thought I would leave that journey behind and let that be enjoyed as it was. But now I've just done something else which I thought would be new and interesting and would show the development a couple of years down the line. And so that's why I'm including this in my crazy series of Eurorack adventures. And yes, indeed, things have changed. I don't know what to tell you. However, all of that aside, what this video is about is to explore the patch that I put together. The patch, I mean, the performance, the piece of music, the composition that I put together for the Southern California Synth Society. They invited me to provide a 15-minute track for their NAMM after show party. Pretty blooming exciting, I think you'll find. So I was delighted to be invited to do that, and so I agonized over it, spent weeks on putting this thing together, and finally did come up with a piece of music which hopefully you can go and check out now. It was such an interesting journey and development, and it was both heartbreaking and intense and full of angst and success and failure and ups and downs, that I thought it would be nice before I pull it all apart, as I'm about to, just to show you, give you a flavour of what it was that I did, what each part does, how it works, and does it work? I mean, that's up to you really, but there we go. So I'm going to unpack it, and hopefully within there are interesting things to hear about and to learn about, and give you some kind of window into my thought process that went through it. So that's the plan, yeah? So settle back and enjoy this exploration into a patch. See, the thing is, right, I can knock out a half decent piece of music at any point. Just like that, drop of a hat. Give me a new piece of gear and I'll sit it down, I'll plug it in and I'll patch it in and I'll bubble something up and something will come along. I do that all the time and it's all right. You hear at the beginning and the end of bits of review videos that I do. You know, when I do a live stream, I might patch something together and off it goes. I enjoy that. I'm almost could possibly say I'm quite good at that. However, they tend to just be for a few minutes, you know, a demo of something while I'm doing a review, a few minutes of stuff. Easy, no problem. 15 minutes is a different story. 15 minutes is all right if you're not really thinking about it. If you're just patching in a live stream and it just sort of comes together, that's fine, that's easy. But an intentional 15 minutes, because it's not a live performance, although I am providing a live performance, I'm not doing it live at the time. I'm filming my own live performance and then submitting that. And so that gives me the opportunity to do it again and again and again until I get it right, which is a good thing and a bad thing, very bad thing. I should have just done it live the once. But had I done that, I wouldn't have been happy with it, because the first time I performed this particular piece is now very different to how it is now. And that would have been a shame. Whereas where I got it to, I feel, was a much better place than where I started. And that's interesting in itself. Because one assumes with something so transitory as Eurorack that you create something and you perform it and then it's gone. That's the vibe. It's the up and the down. It's that sense of modulating through music. And the assumption that you make is that every time you do that, it's going to be great. It's going to sound fantastic. Or at least it came from inside you, so it must be full of soul and interest. And that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a bit crappy. And having the opportunity to work on it a bit was quite revelatory for me. Both in terms of doubting what I'm capable of and exploring what I'm capable of, and discovering perhaps what I'm capable of. that make any sense? Oh, it's all getting a bit deep. All getting a bit deep around here. Right, well, let's put that side aside, and I'll try to explain what it is that I did. So we're going to start with... well, what I should do, right, first, before we start, I'll just turn everything on to give you an idea, because you may not have heard the video, you might not have seen the video. This is the sort of thing I had going. So this is just going to be a quick 2-minute improvisation on the channels of stuff that I've got. Ready, set, go. missed it. Oh, I missed the drop. Anyway, it was something like that, something along those sorts of lines, and it was a joy to play. In the final version that I did mess it up a little bit in the middle bit, but I felt I got away with it, and it was certainly good enough. So that is what I was playing with. So I started off with trying to create a pad. That was my plan. I've been thinking for a little while I could do a video on making a pad in Eurorack, because that's not something that happens a lot, and I think now I know why. Because it's quite difficult. More difficult than I thought. More difficult than I expected. Actually getting oscillators to run together properly was tricky. But that was my starting point. And that felt to be as good a place as any to sort of project into this piece of music. So, the pads. So I started off with just trying to create a chord, which is what we have here. Now it's a little bit, I mean, the tuning is a big problem. In trying to get these right. So I'm using two STOs, these two fellas here, which hopefully you can see, make noise STOs. And initially, I was going to use 3 oscillators. I was also going to use my little Honor oscillator here, which hasn't got much play yet. It's quite new. It's quite interesting. Like it. I was going to combine that with the STO to produce this pad. But with 3 of them going at once, it just felt too busy. There was too much in there. So I added the sub as well. Oh! That doesn't sound right. Doesn't sound right at all. From either of them. So I pulled that out. Now individually, I've got that tone. Let me just take off the filters for the moment. So I've got a single tone. It's just a sine wave, which is being modulated a bit. It's having its shape modulated by the 3PT. And then I've got this one. Just those 2 tones together. That one is also having its shape modulated a little bit. And then initially I had them going through 1 filter, just through the Jove. And that worked quite well. But the problem I was having was that it was just too muddy. There was not enough space in it. It's like when you hit a chord on a polysynth, any kind of, polyphonic synthesizer, it sounds right, assuming you're hitting the right sort of notes. But this was not. It was forever beating against itself or phasing with each other. It just did not sit right. So what I did, I decided to add movement. So I started modulating in different places. I tried modulating the volumes, and that worked quite well. Then each note would be bringing in around itself. But the problem with that was that when I went to the change, to actually start changing the chords, sometimes the note that was needed on that change was turned down because of the modulation. And unless I was going to do a lot of clever stuff with sync, that wasn't really going to happen. So it didn't give the impact of those note changes. So I had to look for something else. So splitting them off into separate filters allowed me to run them with different rate LFOs through different filters. Both of them then had a different feel while still being together. And then when I bring in the chords, I've only got 2 notes, remember, it's not much of a chord. They're much gentler, they're much more related to one another, and for me, much more musical, while still moving and changing. And I really like the 3PT in this that brings in these LFOs. that are changing the shape of the waveform. Then I'm bringing the bass note up, and again. And then that feels like it wants to go somewhere, which all I've really got to do is go back to the beginning. That's as far and as developed as it got. Now, it took me a long way to get there, to that point. I spent a lot of time fiddling with chords, what notes they should be, trying to get it to sound nice. And it took quite a bit of massaging and changing, trying something else, just to pull the sound enough under control that it wasn't just going to overwhelm the whole thing. You know, I could make it spacey, I could make it weird, and I could fade things in and out very easily, but trying to make it sit within a musical framework was more difficult. So that is what I ended up doing. So I went from 3 oscillators and a sub down to just 2 oscillators, from 1 filter to 2 filters, so individual filters making them a bit more polyphonic, funnily enough. And then added back in modulation to change both the filters differently, but also the wave shape a little bit, so that I could do a little bit of manual change to it. Do you see what I mean? So after that, of course, you need a bass line or a lead line or both. I don't know. I don't know what you're supposed to have, but I went for a bit of bass. So this is the bass line we ended up with. Now this is coming from, I don't know, where's it coming from? So this is coming from my even VCO. Now, for some reason, I just couldn't seem to get a classic sort of acid bass that I was after. I don't know what was going on. It just wasn't sitting right. As I say, this whole thing was a struggle in trying to get things together. But eventually I came up with, with just a simple sound. It's just a square wave going through the Polyvox filter over here. And initially I built this track on the black VCO, but funnily enough, I can't seem to get it in tune. I can't calibrate it to itself at the moment. I'm having some great difficulty in getting it to play more than 1 octave. I don't know why that is. I need to look into that a little bit further. So then I switched to the even VCO, a classic square wave. Could be pulse width modulatable, but I don't think it needs it. And what I was finding that with everything else going, it doesn't need to be quite so defined. It doesn't need to be such a big boo type sound. And actually this worked really quite well. I can also push it into distortion through sticking the resonance up through this Polyvox filter. Now, throughout this, I'm playing with the black sequencer from America Synths, and this has also been quite a revelation. So I've been able to write 64 note patterns, because usually I'm dealing with 8 notes or 12 notes, 16 notes, usually maximum, in most of the other sequencers I've got. But with this I could do the 64 notes, which means essentially I could do a couple of repeats and then something different. So that's what we've got going on here, something different happening at the end here. See? Now I did have some CV going into it from a sample and hold, which could have produced that sort of thing, but I think I forgot about it during the performance. It's just an option. Now in terms of envelope, it's actually being enveloped by the Perkle by Bafaka, which I've got over here, which is really a percussive module, but it creates these little short envelopes that I quite like, because I couldn't seem to nail that down either. And so I'm triggering it through there, and that gives me the option to lengthen it. Or whatever. So there was that, but I didn't feel it had enough. So I also routed part of the signal out through a delay somewhere else in the rig, and I've added that into a separate track. So this is going through a mult over here. That's going out to the Erica Synths DSP, just a little DSP module that's got a delay effect, and routing it back into a second channel on my Muton. I mean, this whole track is being run by the SFF Muton, which is an 8-channel mute box, which allows me to turn things on and off, simply. No mixer. I've got little mixers docking around because things were not very well balanced and I had to reduce volumes and boost volumes in certain places. But otherwise it's all just going through this switching box. So that's the first sort of baseline. I had another one which comes through the Behringer Filtamp 2500 module. And this is a much simpler sequence. And funnily enough, I couldn't make it work through the black sequencer. Not that I couldn't make it work, I couldn't come up with what I wanted. I just wanted something simple, and I couldn't seem to achieve it, and it was driving me nuts. So I ended up going from the Variegate 4 Plus, which is over there just out of shot, a Moleko Variegate 4 Plus, and I just dialed in a simple sequence through the... did I put that through this one? Yeah, through the microscale here to force it into a couple of notes, just for simplicity's sake. And this, what you're hearing now, is the Honor oscillator from Nano Modules. It's really, really nice. I've taken one output, which is kind of a slightly wavefolded, slightly askew waveform. Taken that out, put that into the Filtamp here. And then I'm running a couple of things to it. And so in order to trigger it, I'm using the gates out of the Variegate into the dual envelope generator here, which is controlling both the envelope of the amplifier within the Filtamp and also the filter a little bit as well. But you can hear there's that secondary filter action going on. So that's being generated by, I think, another channel out of the Variegate, where I just stick in a couple of extra notes. So the idea is that it's opening up filters on it, opening up the filter more on a couple of points of the sequence. Yeah. So if I take that out, you can just hear the sequence going round, and the filter's the same every time. I can adjust the filter a little bit from the envelope. Like that. But if I poke at the filter via control voltage from a sequencer, so I stick a couple of high notes in, that's going to pick out the filter on a couple of notes of the sequence. And that gives the impression then of there's actually two things going on, two melodies going on, when there really is only one. It's just that the filter's been opened a couple of times during that sequence. It's a brilliant little thing that I learnt weirdly from Suzanne Chiani. I mean, she was around my house, telling me what to do. No, I just saw her mention something about it on a video and I thought, that's genius. Tried it out and it's genius. Got it? Okay, so at this point that I introduced some drums. Well, it's not, because this is a whole mess. I never got to this point until much later. So it's too difficult for me to explain how it all developed over time, because I don't really remember anymore. But anyway, at some point I wanted to put some drums in. So I put in I used part of the black sequencer because the black sequencer has these mod outputs which you can use as trigger sequencers. So to initially, because the black sequencer is only 4 channels, I was using up 3 of them on the pad itself. And so it's kind of like I've run out of space already. So rather than using up gate channels to run any drums, I was using the trigger sequencer part of the modulation outputs, which is a very clever feature of the black sequencer. The 4 mod outputs, one for each channel, can be all sorts of things like LFOs, or envelopes, or triggers, or notes, or regular modulation. So I used it as a trigger sequencer to trigger the Queen of Pentacles. Like that. That was fun. But then I thought, how would that sound if I put it through a bit of distortion? So I've got this wonderful distortion module here called, I can never remember, is it called the Barillo from Kyobra, or is it the Kyobra from Bruello? I don't really remember, but it's fantastic. So I put that in, and suddenly it became this other thing. Now that is awesome. So I thought, well, that's enough. I don't really need to add anything to that. And it has this feedback function, which is just to die for. So that's where that came from. But of course I needed something else. I needed some hi-hat, and this also gave me a lot of trouble. Tried lots of different things, tried lots of drum modules and ways of creating stuff. And I ended up with a number of things kind of mixed together. So this bit, now I wasn't able to do this initially because I didn't have any channels left on the black sequencer. Because in order to do the ratcheting, you need to be using a gate channel, not the mod output, which doesn't have ratcheting. But because I then, after a time, gone down to 2 oscillators on the pad, I suddenly had a channel spare. So I was able to take it and do a little bit of ratchet programming on this over here. So where does it actually go to? I've got to remember now. So this is cool coming into this channel here. Right, this is coming out of a mixer called the Abstract Data, and I've got 2 things plugged into here. I've got the output of the T-Networks ADAC thing over here that creates the blip. Got that? Now that's being triggered from my old friend, the Bastille Compass, over here, that's clocked to everything else, and I've just turned up a couple of knobs and it's getting, it's making its own rhythm. And I quite like that, but it's a little bit thumpy, and it needs that hi-hat. It needs the sizzle of some kind of cymbal. I tried the hi-hat module that I've got. I've tried a few other bits and pieces, and I tried the Basimilus Iteratus Alter a number of times, but eventually I think I got there in the end. So that's what this is. Now I put some modulation into the attack. I also put some modulation into the fold in order to give it that little bit of variation. And it's that which is being run and ratcheted from the black sequencer. I was mightily pleased with that. I don't always get anything but nonsense out of the Basimilus. So that worked quite nicely in together. Yeah, fun all day, every day of the week. Now, of course, I had to have some of the surface in there, the plinky plonky thing. And again, this went through numerous versions. I started off with the stringy sound, and then I hit upon this really cool bit for using more of the organy kind of electric piano sound, and that worked for quite a while. But no, eventually that sort of that part kind of morphed into what the Honor was playing later on, funnily enough. And so it kind of dropped away and wasn't really being used. I thought, no, I've got to be able to put a change in there. And I came back again to the surface and the stringy sound. There's not a whole lot going on there, have to confess. Sometimes there's more. But there it is. So that is getting its music from the wonderful stochastic generator from Omsonic. Now this actually was running the bass line to start with, because I thought that was interesting. But there's something about a bass line where you need it to repeat regularly and you need to get hooked into it. And because this is all based on some form of stochastic probability, it wasn't. It was varying all the time, and it just wasn't hooky enough. So after spending the first couple of days of working on this, absolutely having that as a centre of everything, I then had to drop it out. And again, at that point, things began to develop again, and then I was able to come back and use it a bit more gently on this. So I've just got 3 notes up, a C, an F and an A. And at the same time, I've got an LFO going over the decay, but it's a very attenuated LFO, so it's only changing it a little bit. And that's quite nice. That's quite nice. But I sent another channel, because it's a stereo output. I sent the right-hand channel through the magneto. The magneto box over here that I don't fully understand. Still don't fully understand after all this time. And so I was able to put that in alongside. Like so. And it just brings interesting things. I tend to use a clock, a very, very slow clock on the magneto to turn the shift function on and off. And that gives you these pitch shifting, strange sort of motifs that come in, which is just fantastic. Oh, I also put a flip on the transport control as well to run it backwards sometimes. See, that's really nice. I mean, you can make a whole track out of that by itself. So I used that as a bit of variation. And actually, that's it. I mean, come to think of it, there's only really 6 things because I've doubled up on a couple. So at the top, got my distorted drum, got my mini pops, the pads underneath, pretty sweet. I've then got the surface, which comes and goes. Got this quite nice little arc going on. Sounds really nice, that. That's the best sound I think I've got out of this collection of stuff for a long time. It's just really nice. The filter, that 2500 filter, man. God damn, I wish somebody else made it. And then I'm really enjoying using the Polyfox filter on the ever reliable even VCO. So there you go. The black sequencer played a major role. It was the focus of it, although I spilled out into the variegate, I spilled out into the stochastic generator as well. But that's okay, you don't have to do it all in one thing. I was tempted at one point to bring out the Korg SQ64 in order to run all the percussion. But I felt that was kind of trying too hard. I didn't want to have to program lots and lots of percussion. I just wanted it to be part of the vibe, and so I was able to do that through the manipulation of various channels out of here. But it's interesting how I started off firmly using every single output of the black sequencer, but in the final analysis I've only actually got 2 pitch CVs going out to 2 oscillators. I've got the sequence for the bass line going from here with a gate. I've got a gate going out to... Really? Oh, to trigger the Bassimilus, I think. Yeah, with the ratcheting. That's right. And I've got 3 mod outputs. Let's check to see what they are doing. I've got a pattern sequencer, 2 pattern sequencers, and the sample and hold random that I didn't really use going to the bass line. But it's incredibly versatile. And then using the pattern system, I can copy a pattern, I can paste it to another one, change a few things, like changing the notes for the pad. Because that's kind of all I wanted. All I wanted was this changing pad underneath. You know, a chord that then changes and then changes again. That was what I was aiming to achieve, and I kind of feel I managed to do it. I mean, I also played with the tempo a great deal. You know, I started off, I think, at 100 BPM. At one stage, I was up to 160 BPM. It's kicking this thing out. And I think I arrived back at 110. 110 BPM is where we ended up, which just seemed to suit it. It didn't need to be quite so fast. I think it was the last thing I did was to back it back off again. It was the last change that I made, because it was just getting a bit too frantic, and it didn't need to be. It somehow had more gravitas being a little bit slower, which is interesting. So what did I learn from all of this one? I don't know. It's always learning. I'm always learning. I'm always discovering a couple of things, that some things work really well, some things don't. I spent a long time on the Pittsburgh Modular Lifeforms Voltage Lab trying to use that. I still can't get a sound out of it that I want to use. It's kind of frustrating at the same time as being something that I aspire to get into grips with. But it just wasn't bringing the sound that I was after. Because, you know, this sound... I can so latch in, my brain just goes, that's lovely. Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. This as well, you know, that's lovely. But some other sounds, I can't always find them. I tried to include the RYK sequencer, and I did for a bit, and then dropped that out. I keep trying to include the data bender from Qubit, but I can't get anything usable out of it. It just seems to generate nonsense. Maybe that's its purpose, but it needs further investigation for me to work that out. 3PT has been awesome in all of this. So has the Jove. I was really pleased I was able to use the Instruo filter a lot more, the Treg, or whatever it's called, because I've often used that in the past purely as a sine wave, purely as a self-resonating oscillator, self-oscillating filter. I've used that a lot because it's got a real sweet sine wave that comes out of it. So this time I used it on the pad, and it was really nice, really nice, because it's not an acid filter. It's not an aggressive filter. It's a soft ladder filter. Oh, and there's one other thing which is not in my Muton, and that's the lead. This bit here. I just wanted to be able to perform something, and so, you know, fiddled around trying, how am I going to do any of that? Because I was also playing a lot with the Black Sequencer overdub mode. It has the ability to record through itself and then overdub and then fill on top of that. And I was trying to do something with that, but I couldn't seem to get that to work in the context of what I was doing. So I wanted something a bit more freeform, something that wasn't going to be there all the time. And so I ended up wiring up the Arturia thing here. I experimented with having this running clocked, but it seemed to be that once you clock this, it's always running an arpeggiator or a sequencer. You can't seem to turn it off. So I thought, sod it, I'll play it. So I've got this wired into the Casatronics 3340 VCO over here. And then, of course, I've got the mod strip here wired into the Wasp filter that it's going through. Although also playing with it manually allowed you to really find that because I've got the resonance all the way up. And there's a really nice edge to it. I mean, that's classic 90s acid, that is. And I got this running through the Erica Synths black stereo delay on the other side of the thing. Lots of long cables going from here, back to there again. And that was just a lot of fun. To throw that in. I think that's a lot. And out of that, I somehow pulled about 15 minutes of some kind of something that seemed to work all right. But I have other things to get on with now, so I have to put it apart. And it's that sort of painful and yet beautiful moment where something you've been working on for a long time that has given you immense amounts of pleasure, you're about to put it apart. You're about to put it apart because you need to move on to other things, and that's it. I have performed it. I have recorded it. It's good, and it's time. It's time to let it go, I think. Well, there you go. I hope that was helpful. And there's all sorts of stuff coming along the channel. I've got a full review of the Black Sequencer coming along very, very soon. I've got tons of DIY coming along, building your own modules, and lots of videos on bits and pieces to come. There's no end to it. No end to it. So if you've enjoyed this, please do like, subscribe, and consider heading over to the Patreon page where you could throw me a couple of quid. That would be wonderful. And in the meantime, go and make some tunes.